Now by Peter Zwack, who's a retired US general who also served as an American defense attaché to Russia. Peter, first of all, it's 10 o'clock at night in this lovely city, Istanbul, and you've decided to come and sit with us in the TRT World Studio. Thank you so much indeed.
The honor's mine.
We're almost 3 months now into this conflict. Are you surprised by Russia's failure to achieve its objectives until now, but also the Ukrainian resistance?
Both, absolutely. What we saw from 2014 is the, if you will, the birth, if you will, of a new Ukrainian firmness, toughness, military identity, but not formed as it is today. But there was some tough fighting in Donbass, Donetsk airport, the cyborgs and all of that, 2014. But nobody, I think, fully anticipated the moxie, the firmness, the home team fight. You use sports analogies. And this, the Russians completely miscalculated, and they committed a force way too small for the task, broke it up into 5 different axes of advance, didn't inform their forces in advance on what was going on, and their performance has been shockingly subpar all across the front. They're quick learners, but I don't know if they can recover from this if this continues at the velocity that it is.
I've asked this question to 2 previous guests, but they haven't been military professionals, so I'm going to repeat it because I need to get your take on the many, many Russian soldiers who are accused of war crimes. The very first trial has started of a 21-year-old Russian soldier. He says he was given the order to kill that 62-year-old unarmed Ukrainian civilian. But the other atrocities, what we've seen around Bucha and around those towns that surround Kiev and the mass graves, do you think it's because the Russian troops have been specifically given instructions to behave like that? Or is it the complete opposite? They haven't been given enough orders?
It is a really excellent, nuanced question. I would say I don't think that they understood what they were getting into. Many of certainly the young conscripts that were in there and all of a sudden faced with a tough resistance, you're fighting on top of a population that is fiercely fighting you, that speaks a variation of your language. You have grandmothers getting in front of your tank saying, "What are you doing, Neltsa?" And I don't think a lot of the rank and file were ready for that and briefed for that. They thought it was going to be a cakewalk to Kiev or quick resistance. When you have a fight on a domestic land, on a homeland, and you have a population that is increasingly motivated, and all of a sudden the emergence of a leader in Zelensky that nobody expected, that motivated, the Ukrainians rallied. And this gets at the point of motivation, the will to fight. And the Russians, most of them had no desire to be in this fight early on, and we're seeing that played out. So you have firepower, you have almost a disdain and arrogance, I think, from the Russian side. And maybe the way they looked at Ukraine as a non-country, they treated their military as a non-military, and they're paying the effects. It's been bloody for the Ukrainians, but we were seeing, I think, the birth really started in 2014 of a modern Ukrainian identity that is both born in pride and leadership and born in blood.
So the analysis, the generally accepted analysis, is that now Vladimir Putin is focusing on the east of Ukraine. He's going to try to grab as much territory as possible, and then we see where we go from there. If there's going to be any sort of resolution, all wars obviously end with resolutions, diplomatic discussions. If he wants to keep that part of eastern Ukraine, whether he wants to occupy it or annex it, how difficult is it going to be for him to control? It's another country.
Well, you see this where there are Russian forces in what we would call newly occupied Ukraine, because they occupied land in 2014. And you see those red blobs, especially in the south and parts of the Donetsk farther out. Well, that's where the Russian forces are on the line, but that doesn't mean they hold the ground in getting at your point. And there you have resistance, partisans, territorials. You've attacked a nation of 40 million people. Yes, you're 145 million if you're the Russians, But this is in a large country, but a relatively concentrated space. And of that 40 million, probably 3 to 4 are able-bodied if they all were to fight. And I'm not saying that they're fighting directly, but whether it's active or passive resistance, getting at your point, this is hard if you're an occupying force and you know you're an occupying force and you're having to go to punitive measures and you're bringing in your foreign elements, you know, to do a lot of your dirty work. And all that does is it just firms and incites the passion of the Ukrainian resistance, and that what the Russians have taken a bat, they've hit a hornet's nest, and now they're being stung from hornets all over, and there is a main defense line along the Donbass, which is also hard going for them.
I want to end with your experiences in Russia. It was just after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Yes. You've written a book called Swimming the Volga, in which you've noted how very few people became very rich very quickly. Did you think at that time that Russia may end up being this strange hybrid that it is? Not fully a democracy, not fully an autocracy, not totally a kleptocracy, but certainly a society where the elite almost seems to have no accountability at all, that would allow Vladimir Putin to exploit the country to the point that he has now, having served endlessly as president and then prime minister and manipulating his country to take it into a conflict like this. Did you ever think when you were living in Russia that this might happen to the country?
Hanan, it's a great question, and I still wonder. All I know is that the book starts in 1989 when I'm studying as a young army officer, part of Glasnost.
And still it was the Soviet Union at that time.
And it was still the Soviet Union. And then I go back to this provincial city called Tver. I was there a total of 9 times between 89 and 99. And that was my window into Russia, mostly as a tourist studying friends. There was among a lot of the population earlier on, Adnan, there was a euphoria. Democracy, freedom, we're going to get rich.
McDonald's.
All of that. But the basis for that, the foundations weren't there. And then the book covers this period during the 1990s where it starts to fail. You have the state firms hijacked. You have young farsovshikis, the term black marketeers, become big marketeers. Some become oligarchs. And what you would call the mainstream, the good, the honest people that you get in any country, are left holding the bag. And so the experiment with democracy is a failure, though parts of it exist. And all of this is playing out. This is the end of Yeltsin into Putin. I don't think anybody expected what we are seeing now, a 1939 World War II type invasion of Ukraine, though at the time I was there was the breakup of the Soviet Union, Adnan, and that was exactly 30 years ago, last Christmas. And that is the scar tissue for a lot of the older generations, certainly like Putin. But remember, any Russian under 40 years old doesn't even remember the Soviet Union. So there's a lot going on that I can only touch. The book is a very personal account about the Russian street and not about big policy.
Sure, absolutely. But you were there, you were living it. Yeah. And as you say, Vladimir Putin is a man who says that the collapse of the Soviet Union was one of the biggest tragedies of the 20th century. So that's something to indicate his mindset. Peter Zwack, thank you so much indeed for coming in. Really appreciate it. Now you can enjoy Istanbul.
Honored for the invitation.
Take care.
Thank you all.